Hi friends, good morning. So today we'll move on with something very interesting on IFSC because for those of us who've read FEMA, this will also give you a perspective on what can RBI, what control RBI can have on overseas operations of Indian banks, and this will also give you a flavor on how RBI sitting in India controls what happens to Indian subsidiaries abroad. So the overarching ability of FEMA. So thanking Graceland and Jugal for their efforts. So it's a fairly detailed and a complex topic which we are going to look at this point. It would begin with what are the FEMA regulations on IFSC, setting up of international banking units, what are the activities permitted by them, and the recent conversation around rupee derivatives. And 2 days back, we were on a webinar with the head of IFSC in India, Gift City, and where he was saying how they've got the approval for USD INR transaction, derivatives out of IFC India, potential benefits of this rupee derivative, and what are the concerns in this space. So every discussion has two parts to it. So moving on, any financial institution which is set up in the IFSC shall be treated as a person not resident in India. So they basically, as we saw earlier, an IFSC is a place located in an SEZ in India, in Gujarat, and that is treated more like an offshore. Okay, SEZ is not a part of the domestic territory, and therefore the domestic laws do not apply. A specific regulation on foreign exchange management, IFSC regulations 2015, was introduced, and those would be the guiding factors behind this. Similarly, RBI has also given up regulations on banking units, and we today's conversation would revolve around that. Let's try and understand the foreign exchange management rules. So, the regulations pertaining to IFCs. Uh, what is a financial institution for the purposes of setting up an IBU? So, a financial institution shall include a firm, AOP, BOI, whether incorporated or an AJP, artificial juridical person, who is engaged in rendering financial services or carrying out financial transactions. The term financial institution shall include banks, insurance, uh, broking companies, pension funds, mutual funds. So, any of these entities which are engaged in providing any financial service. That's why, if you notice, friends, IFSC per se refers to a financial services hub. So, it need not necessarily be restricted to only your large institutional investors. It can also be people who are engaged in providing a lot of services. And sorry, what does it take to set up an international banking unit? So when you look at it, the scheme is different for Indian as well as the foreign banks. So for Indian banks, the public and private sector banks are authorized to which are authorized to deal in forex can set up an IBU. And foreign banks, if they have a special permission from their home country regulator, they have a right, they can set it up. Prior permission of RBI is required to be obtained in Banking Regulation Act. And for Indian banks, this would be treated as setting up of a overseas branch if they set up an office in IFSC. And for a foreign bank, it will be deemed as if they are setting up a branch in India, subject, of course, to their home country regulations. And minimum of 20 million US dollars is the capital required, and they are outside the ambit of all your CRR and SLR requirements of RBI. So this makes it fairly less onerous for institutions to set up their uh, outfits in an IFSC. They of course have to comply with anti-money laundering and other regulatory and reporting requirements of RBI. Priority sector ceilings will not apply for an IFSC institution, and also deposit insurance is not available. And RBI will also not provide them the lender of last resort situation. There are 11 Indian institutions as of 30th September. And these are those two PSUs, Bank of Baroda and SBI, which have set up there. And private sector banks, almost all major banks are there in that place, including Yes Bank. What are the activities which are permissible for an IFSC in the IBU? Uh, an IBU can undertake first for to do certain approved transactions with residents and certain specified transactions for non-residents. But by and large, friends, if you notice, an IBU is basically meant for dealing with non-residents and not dealing too much with residents. All transactions with IBUs shall be in foreign currency. It shall not be in your INR. They can deal with wholly owned subsidiaries or JVs of Indian entities abroad. So instead of you setting up a bank account in Singapore, you have a subsidiary there. The subsidiary can set up a bank account in an IFSC. And IBUs are permitted to undertake factoring and discounting of export receivables. So post-shipment credit is allowed. Pre-shipment credit at this point is not allowed, but from highly placed sources, a lot of representations have been made by banks to get this. They can accept FDs in Forex for a tenure of less than 1 year. And the RBI will not prescribe any limits for raising short-term liabilities from banks. However, they must maintain your liquidity coverage ratio and net stable funding ratio as prescribed by the Basel Committee. So that, because those are applicable to all banks in the international scenario. Similarly, for opening of bank accounts, no savings accounts are allowed to be opened as of now, but current accounts will be opened. And for the corporate borrowers from our regulation shall apply. And IBUs can open foreign currency escrow account of Indian resident entities to temporarily hold subscriptions to the ADR and GDR issues until the issuance of receipts. They cannot raise liabilities from retail customers, including HNIs, and no check facilities available. So, to give you a perspective here, we did have conversations with, as I mentioned, with some very senior stakeholders in IFSC, and very soon you would end up seeing banks here being allowed the right to receive money in foreign currency from domestic residents under the LRS schemes. That's going to happen very, very soon. Derivatives, with the approval of the board of directors, IBUs can undertake derivative transactions. So it is not prohibited, it is absolutely permitted. And they can also become a trading member of an exchange in the IFSC. Both NSE and BSE have their subsidiaries in Gift City. And they are also allowed to participate in exchange traded currency derivatives on rupee, which are listed in stock exchanges in IFSC. But at this point in time, when it comes to currency transactions, we do not have USD INR derivative, but that's very, very soon, which is coming up at this very, very soon. We're looking at a matter of weeks. IBUs can act as arrangers or underwriters of INR denominated overseas bond issues. Professional clearing member, they can also become a clearing member of the exchange in IFSC for clearing and settling in any derivative segments subject to the conditions prescribed. I'm not getting into the conditions here, but these are the options which are available for institutions to set up there. And prudential norms, all prudential norms of overseas branches of Indian banks would apply to IBUs. And specifically, they would be required to follow the 90-day payment delinquency norm for NPA provisioning. But this, again, if you notice, friends, is very much in sync with the existing position of RBI in the way they regulate the overseas branches of Indian entities. Ring fencing the activities of IBUs, there would be a separate balance sheet in foreign currency, and this would not be allowed to deal in INR except in the case of special non-resident rupee account. And the transactions of these units in INR would be done through authorized dealers, and they would be funded only in foreign remittances. So please understand, friends, the concept of an IBU within an IFSC is basically to provide a framework for Indian banks to operate in an overseas jurisdiction within India, and for overseas banks to operate in the comfort of operating in an overseas jurisdiction within India. So that's the logic behind these. Rupee derivatives at IFSC. So on 4th of October 2019, in Statement on Development and Regulatory Policies, the RBI stated that the recommendation of the task force on offshore rupee markets where they said it would be allowed, rupee derivatives would be allowed with settlement in foreign currency to start trading in the IFSC, and currency futures and currency options contract may be listed. So I'll give you a brief peek on what this actually means, because when you look at a currency future transaction, it's a foreign exchange transaction which happens in any recognized stock exchange to buy or sell a currency, one currency against another on a future date. So, and this is uh, on a specified date, but does not include a forward contract. So, in a futures contract, you end up buying or selling currency against, and let's say USD INR, though it's not yet started with. So, you would say I would buy $500,000 3 months down the line at 78 rupees per dollar, or I would sell, and there would be a counterparty to subscribe to this. But an option is, you will say, I'll have the right to buy this contract at 78 rupees. If on that date, if the rupee is, let's say, 79 to a dollar, the differential of 1 rupee can be settled to you by way of cash. Now, this is what the RBI wants to start trading. So, currency futures and option contracts are permitted in any currency pair involving the rupee or otherwise. And however, persons resident in India shall not be eligible to undertake currency futures and options contract unless they have specific approval from RBI. But that's not the case for those who are located abroad. And what are the features at the high level? The settlement has to happen in a currency other than INR, and the premium shall be quoted in a currency other than INR, and the settlement, the for the options or future contract involving rupee, shall be the FBIL reference, which is nothing but your financial benchmark India Private Limited reference. Moving on, similar other directions which are procedural for such type of contracts have also been notified at this point in time. So, what are the benefits of permitting non-deliverable rupee derivatives in the IFSC? There are quite a few. At the highest level, these transactions have thus far been happening in other exchanges like Singapore, Hong Kong, or London. Now we are moving those to India. So you're moving significant amount of exchange activity in India. So, I'm told the recent numbers are $3 billion per day is the volume of currency trading which happens in India. And we've also given a fairly good amount of tax concessions for transactions in this space. And what it also does is it makes the Indian IFSC a more comprehensive service provider, because where people are allowed to engage in various asset classes. Similarly, masala bonds are now permitted to be listed in IFSC. So masala bonds are basically Indian rupee denominated debt instruments which are traded in INR. Similar access to market information, tremendous access you would have. You don't need to depend on an overseas exchange for information. And it provides a significant level playing field for Indian banks, because they can do the transactions within India instead of not depending on dealing in another third party exchange in Hong Kong or Singapore or London. What are the concerns? Obviously, you will have two sides to a coin. So, reduction in onshore business, there is a threat perception that by doing this, there could be a shift in business from onshore to IFSC, but which by and large is unfounded. Impact on exchange rate management policy and development of onshore market. Now, this is a genuine case for concern. Um, in considering the risk that participation of Indian banks may improve liquidity in the offshore market and undermine development of onshore. The task force was of the view that Indian banks should not be permitted to deal in offshore rupee market. However, as is the case with not as is not the case with any other offshore rupee market, when use IFSC has a potential of providing certain benefits to India. So therefore, the fact that the Indian institutions are prohibited from dealing in offshore rupee market outside should not be brought down to India. And the spillover risks from IFSC to onshore market. So that's something which, if something goes wrong with IFSC, there could be a hinterland collapse. That's a risk which every institution, like let's say every in Hong Kong, I mean New York or London, which have a large hinterland advantage, have to undergo. I don't foresee that to be a cause for concern. So if you look at this, friend, this will give you a good perspective. The red one is the offshore So this is a comparison between onshore and offshore exchange traded in USD INR futures. You would see that the blue ones are onshore. Post 1718, the onshore dealing volume has increased. The market share is somewhere close to about uh, 56, 58%, and the offshore has been coming down. And with IFSC coming on board, I think this number should definitely be the blue line, assuming we should have one more line for IFSC, and that IFSC would be picking up its market share from the offshore market. So definitely it's going to act in our favor. On a different note, India as a country is still a net importer of financial services. So obviously, by moving one by one in terms of services from offshore going to a third party jurisdiction to an IFSC in India, we're only trying to expand the Indian offering to the world. So these were, I believe, some of the conversations in this regard. Very positive step in terms of what's happening. And the IFSC authority has also been notified earlier this week. So amidst all this chaos, the government still found it worthwhile to pursue this option. So we're fairly optimistic that this is going to be the future of financial services, a space where India is going to, at least, if not dominate, at least rule over the next 10, 15 years and beyond. Thank you and have a great day, friends.